Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joe Pisapia, and it's time for round 2 of the playoffs, the starts, the sits, the guys you need in your lineup, the guys who need to get kicked to the curb, and to help us get all of our lineups set for Week 16. D-Bro, Derek Brown, the King of Bros, the Fantasy Bro, and of course, the prop prophet, the Undertaker himself, Andrew Erickson. And we are going to go through the guys who are not going to make the lineups first here on the show today. Gentlemen, round 2 is right here. We've got Thursday, we've got Saturday, we've got Sunday, we've got Monday. It is a slow drip of games. And for some of you, that's going to be really difficult, because you got to really look ahead at some players that you may or may not have available to you because of injuries and when those games are. So this is a PSA for all of you out there. Make sure you're checking about the schedules of these games, because if you got two guys you're trying to decide between and one plays on Monday and one plays on Saturday, well, you might have to make some hard decisions at some point here and get fantasy points. Always take the points. That's what I always do. Leave the cannolis, take the points. It's the opposite of The Godfather, and Derek Brown would get that reference if he ever saw it, but he hasn't. But let's get to the players here, and I'm wearing my Bijan Robinson shirt for those of you watching on the YouTube channel. Again, hashtag free Bijan. I am all in. If you somehow made it through round 1, you still have Bijan, get him back in your lineups. But boys, let's start with the guys we want out of our lineups. Andrew Erickson, let's kick things off here with a running back that you are unhappy to start and want to sit in Week 16.
I want to sit Austin Ekeler, because this orange has no juice left. It's over. It's over for Austin Ekeler this season. When you look at what he's done recently, he's been outside the top 30 running backs every week. He has not scored a touchdown. So he's getting nothing done as a rusher. I mean, Isaiah Spiller is seeing more carries than Austin Ekeler is. I know that a lot of it came in garbage time last week, but the last two games the Chargers have played, Ekeler has been splitting carries 3 ways with Joshua Kelly and Isaiah Spiller. So you're getting no rushing production from Austin Ekeler against the Bills defense that ranks number 3 overall against running backs over the last 4 weeks in terms of fantasy points allowed. So bad matchup. Ekeler can't take advantage of the times the Bills have actually let up rushing production. So you're just hoping that he catches 6, 7, 8 balls. And if it's not full PPR, like Austin Ekeler's, the points that he's getting are not going to help you. So he's a floor play at best, especially in half PPR, where you're not even getting a full point per the receptions. And if he doesn't score, he's going to be at best an RB3. So given that you're playing in your semifinals this week and you need high scores, you need high ups, Austin Ekeler's not a high upside play. So there are guys that you maybe have been starting over Ekeler all year long. This is not the week to start. This is the week to start them over Ekeler. He just doesn't have a lot of upside in this matchup.
No, you're 100% right. And what a long way we've come here from draft season, where Ekeler was a first-round pick, to a guy that you don't even want to start in the playoffs. Yikes. That's the story of 2023 at the end of the day. But that's the whole point. That's why these shows are so important, because everything is always moving. What you think is going to be good in the beginning of the year, what seems like it's a lock, by the time sometimes we get to this point in the season, it's anything but. Derek Brown, who is also not a lock at running back for you this week, and who is sitting?
Javonte Williams, man. And you look at his stat line last week in a tough matchup, 14 touches, 20 total yards. That's frightening. That's the kind of stuff that just puts the fear in you. And this week, we could see a similar stat line. All season, Joe, we've talked about this. You can throw on the Patriots. Mm-hmm. You cannot run on them. Since week 10, fewest rushing yards allowed per game, the 5th lowest missed tackle rate per game. And Javonte, look, kind of like Erickson's talking about, he does not score in this game, and you're going to hate life and wish that you did not play him. There's so many guys, wide receivers, what have you, that I will play over Javonte this week.
Echoes of our Tuesday show on the prediction podcast, where Erickson and I were talking about, he was one of my number one things this week, which is avoid Javonte Williams like the plague. We're on the same page here. New England's defense just too good, and take the unders too. Make some extra cash on that as well. You got to go. And on the flip side too, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, but you know, the Denver Broncos give up a lot of running yards. So we'll get to that eventually in our other show here. All right, Erickson, back to you for another running back you want to sit in week 16.
Jerome Ford. So he's kind of in that RB3 range in terms of the ECR and most of the rankings. I just don't think this is a really good matchup for him. Look, the Texans just shut down Derrick Henry in December. That's something that's really, really hard to do. And you look at the last 4 weeks, the Texans have been much worse against the pass than the run. Top 10 and fewest rushing yards allowed and points allowed to running backs over the last 4 weeks. So look, Jerome Ford, he is the lead back in a committee. Like, he doesn't see a lot of red zone touches. They always give the ball to Kareem Hunt whenever they close in on scoring. So that's really annoying. And Jerome Ford, again, similar to Ekeler, you're just really hoping he gets the receiving production, which has been there with obviously Joe Flacco dropping back 40 times per game. But again, you want ceiling plays in the playoffs because you're playing the best teams. And Jerome Ford, to me, again, is not a ceiling play in this matchup, even though the Browns are a favorite. They're still on the road. So I just don't like the spot here for Jerome Ford. So as a guy that, he's not going to kill you because he just doesn't have that touchdown upside. So I'm going to try to be sitting him for other options.
Let's see who had Ekeler and Ford. Who would you play if you had only one spot available?
I would still start Ekeler.
Okay, that's what I figured you'd say, but I figured I would check too. Because look, Flacco's been moving the football. Even though some of those moments have been kind of pulling a rabbit out of your hat, still bunch of 300-yard games in a row. It can't all be bad. Also, a good matchup against Houston Texans too. All right, let's go to another RB that you don't feel good about in Week 16. D-Bro, who is it?
Antonio Gibson. I was not on this train last week. I'm still not on it. It can keep riding along the tracks, man. And for everybody that thought they were going to get bell cow Antonio Gibson last week, I wrote this up in the primer. I'm like, no, he's probably going to split with Chris Rodriguez. And we saw that last week, man. Like, he played 45% of the snaps, 9 touches, 35 total yards. A very much Antonio Gibson-esque stat line. I do not want to play him. Like, he basically... I've been fighting myself on a weekly basis for the last 4 to 5 weeks to just not even write him up in the primer because he should not be in lineups, man. And this week coming up, the Jets might have a lot of warts and their run defense has been suspect at times this season. But since week 10, they're playing good, man. 12th best stuff rate, 11th lowest yards after contact per attempt. Antonio Gibson, not put him in lineups.
D-Bro, when you fight yourself, does one of the versions of you fight dirty?
Oh, yes.
I figured.
Below the belt, pulling the shirt over the head, just like an NHL, hockey fight. It gets bad, baby.
All right, Erickson, give us one more RB who does not make the cut in Week 16, round 2 of the playoffs.
It's going to be Gus Edwards for me. I don't like the matchup here against the 49ers. Look, the 49ers gave up a lot of explosive runs last week to the Cardinals, but that's not really Gus Edwards' game. He's not the super explosive runner. He's someone that the Ravens rely on to grind out clock at the end of the games. They obviously like using him in the red zone, but this is the matchup where you're least likely to see the Ravens score a ton of points, because they are facing one of the tougher teams, the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. So I just don't think, yes, there is no Keaton Mitchell, but I don't think that automatically means, okay, now it's Gus Edwards time, because I think we're probably going to see a lot more Justice Hill in this game. If this game is more back and forth, if the 49ers or the Ravens are trailing in this game, that's when Justice Hill plays. Mm-hmm. And also Melvin Gordon is also going to be active in this game too. Ugh. So the Ravens just love to use committees in all ways, shapes, and forms. So Gus Edwards, again, you're praying he scores a touchdown, and this is probably the least likely matchup where that's actually going to happen. I actually looked at his touchdown odds, and they're actually a plus money, which is never the case with Gus Edwards, just based on how many touchdowns he scored this year and how good the Ravens offense has been. So I just think, again, like all the running backs I've talked about, just not a lot of upside with Gus Edwards. So really any of these players you're playing as more of a desperation floor play rather than, I feel good about putting this guy in my lineup.
All right, one correction, though. They're the best team in the NFL, not the NFC. And don't tell Welsh I said that, because you know how he gets.
Oh, don't tell him. Don't tell him.
Do not tell him
please
that,
don't
please.
Tell him.
But you know what? Gus Edwards, I think in a standard league, I think you still roll him out there. Honestly, I know he's touchdown dependent, but he scores touchdowns. And no, I expect the 49ers to roll the Ravens, not roll the Ravens, but win convincingly. That's how I expect this game to go, at least. I think looking at some of these running backs and some of these offenses, I think in a standard league, you still start Gus out there, but in the full point or half point PPRs, I certainly can understand the pause. All right. I don't want to take a pause here too much further. So let's get right to the last RB for Derek Brown, who he wants to sit this week.
Well, this comes down to James Conner, and I understand a lot of people have to play him, and I mentioned his name a few times on the show, and it's burned me in weeks past, but I keep putting respect on the Bears' name, man. Their defense, people don't want to do it, people don't want to play them, they're still out on waiver wires, I don't understand it, but I'm not playing James Conner this week. I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to have a tough time versus this Bears run defense. You look at since week 10, fourth fewest rushing yards per game, the sixth lowest explosive run rate. Connor's played well in the last 2 games, but we can easily look back to any one of his earlier game logs, and now you add a terrible matchup on top of it. Nah, man, he's an RB3 for me this week.
Understandably so. All right, before we continue on with a little who should I start at the RB, I just want to remind everybody, look, this is the perfect time of season for a little bit of Miller Lite. You've got games every single day practically. You got bowl season starting up already. So there's plenty of opportunities to go out there and get some Miller Lites and get your, I would say the winter feelings, a little bit of a spirits inside, the little holiday spirit that lives inside of all of us. Why not feed that with a little bit of Miller Lite? Because with a Miller Lite in your hand, winter doesn't just taste great. It tastes like Miller time. And of course, if you want to celebrate your achievements in fantasy, well, that's a great time for Miller Lite. If you want to drown your sorrows and your team's not making the playoffs or losing in the second round or first round or having the best record and being ousted by a team that barely set their lineup all year, that's also a good time to have a cold Miller Lite. So get it delivered right to your door, MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Lite Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories, 3.2 carbs, which is a good thing too, because everybody's eating too much around the holidays. For every 12 ounces, that, my friends, is winter. That, my friends, is Miller Lite. Let's play a little game, shall we, boys, of Who Should I Start? And, of course, you can check out the Who Should I Start tool, which is free over at FantasyPros.com/start. Get you a little idea of who you should be starting this week in the NFL. I'm going to give you two running backs. We're kind of on the fringe. I want to know who you should start here. Let's start with David Montgomery or Ty Chandler. D-Bro, who would you rather start between those two guys?
I'm going Montgomery. Touchdown expectations. I mean, the guy has scored in almost every single game that he's played. I think it's like 8 out of 11 games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's David Montgomery for me.
All right, let's go to another one here. Let's say Josh Jacobs is active. Again, we don't have news on this quite yet, but if Josh Jacobs is active, do you want to start him or Jaylen Warren? I know on the predictions pod, Erickson, you talked a lot about Jaylen Warren. Would you give him the start over a questionable, healthy Josh Jacobs and not waiting to get there?
I would play Jacobs. I'd play even Zamir White.
Nobody asked you. I asked Erickson. Darn it. That was his turn, but it's nice that you care so much to answer. Erickson, do you agree with Derek Brown, even though he stole your question? Thief.
I mean, I like Warren. I just don't trust like Josh Jacobs, honestly. I don't trust the Raiders. I don't trust them playing on the road against the Chiefs defense. Like, what are we going to get from the Raiders? So they scored 0 points 2 weeks ago. They scored 63 last week.
I know.
So we're probably going to get something where in the middle. And I don't think that's going to be enough. Josh Jacobs coming off an injury. I don't know. I want to ride Jaylen Warren against the Bengals.
Okay, fair enough.
I can't play Fantasy Grinch here.
You can play Fantasy Grinch.
You're going to take that away from me?
You're that kid in the front of the class looking for extra credit before the midterms are over. Ooh, teacher, before we go, I bought you a little something. Here's a little gift card for Starbucks. Wink, wink. You know, maybe my grade gets a little better. You know what I'm saying?
Barnes & Noble. Is that the most gifted gift card?
I think it's Starbucks probably at this point.
Probably Starbucks.
What do you think, Erickson? Like, if you're a teacher, you want the Starbucks gift card? You want the Barnes & Noble gift card?
I know that. I think when I was younger, my parents would always give me Dunkin' Donuts gift cards to give to my teachers.
Well, you live in New England area, so that's pretty much like
a New England
that's like
thing.
A currency. That's like the equivalency of Kohl's Cash in New Jersey.
Cards.
Like you get the same thing. All right, let's get to the wide receivers. D-Bro, we can start with you because we know you're very excited today. Let's start about the wide receivers you don't want to play in Week 16, and we're gonna start with a guy in Washington. Who is it?
Man, I'm not going to be trapped by recency bias. I'm old enough to remember when we didn't want to play Terry McLaurin, and I'm still there, man. Like, going against the Jets, we know what the Jets secondary can do, and really this is the Commanders team that they've looked like they've kind of quit over the last few weeks. Like, we don't even know who's going to play quarterback. Yeah, probably Sam Howell starts the game. Does he even finish the game? And Sam Howell has not been kind to Terry McLaurin. So, to be honest, I would much rather see Jacoby Brissett under center. But the tandem of Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, we know what they can do, and I'm not playing Terry McLaurin this week.
All right. No McLaurin. He is out, understandably so. I can't wait to see if the Jets just completely fold up the tent and quit. Like that's the one thing right now.
Possible.
Because they are eliminated from the playoffs. Everything has just gone so sour. It's been so bad. It was such an embarrassing loss in Miami for a team that if they just stayed alive, maybe they got Rodgers back and maybe they make some magical run. So I'm fascinated to see if they just fold up the tents and go home. But it's good fantasy to probably look elsewhere than McLaurin because you make a really good point there about that Jets defense, even though last week was rough. Erickson, wide receiver, who sits for you this week?
I'm going to say Jayden Reed. I know that he's been hot over the last couple of weeks, but I just hate this game, honestly, Packers and Panthers. Like, when you look at the Panthers, all the games that they've played in Carolina have gone under the points total. It's basically where totals go to die, is Carolina. So we saw it last week. There were one touchdown scored in the game that played between the Falcons and Panthers. And Reed is also banged up, dealing with an ankle injury. He's been banged up the last couple weeks, dealing with injuries, leaving games. So the Panthers are really bad against the run, and they're not bad against the pass. They're one of the better pass defenses in the NFL, and they've gotten their guys healthy. So, look, they're allowing the third fewest fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers this season. That's where Jayden Reed primarily lines up. So the fact that he's been banged up, the fact that it's a horrible matchup, don't like Jordan Love a lot in this matchup either. I'm going to be looking elsewhere for upside at my wide receiver slot.
That's going to be a tough sell for a lot of people who've been riding that Jayden Reed train for a few weeks. I mean, he's been like 4 of the last 5 weeks, he's been money. So that's going to be a tough pill to swallow.
So
I want to start everybody. This is participation trophies.
Not allowed.
No.
Actually, I don't even know if he plays this week with the turf toe.
That was my other question too.
Decision.
That toe issue that cropped up at the end of the game last week. That's a serious thing. That if it is indeed, it was indeed the turf toe, right? Like, did we get the diagnosis of the turf toe? Because at first it was just he has a toe issue. And I'm like, well, is it turf toe? Because if it's turf toe, then that's a bad scene right there. We all know that. All right, back to you, D-Bro. Give me another wide receiver that you don't want to start, and I feel like we're going to go back to an LA team here.
People are going to chase last week's stat line to Josh Palmer, and Keenan Allen probably doesn't play this week. There's no way in hell I'm doing that this week. Like, he's catching targets from Easton Stick. Yes, he got over 100 yards last week, but he got a 12.5% target share. Good luck chasing that. I'm not doing it, man. The Buffalo Bills secondary since week 9, 9th lowest PPR points per target, fewest receiving yards allowed per game to perimeter wide receivers. Do not play Josh Palmer. He's a trap.
Chasing points, baby. Chasing points. Don't chase points. Erickson, back to you with another wide receiver that does not make the grade for week 16.
Marquise Brown. I'm not really sure what happened to him. He was kind of playing last week, but not really. He's clearly not healthy. So, again, tough matchup against the Chicago Bears. We thought Marquise Brown could have like a strong finish to the season just based on the playoff schedule that the Cardinals have. Kyler Murray was going to come back, but I don't know what happened. Like, since Kyler Murray came back, he's been super unproductive. And now he's hurt. So Marquise Brown, he's outside the top 50 in terms of ECR. Just don't even really consider him. Like, he's really not any type of option. Really, any of these Arizona Cardinals wide receivers, even Marquise Brown misses the game. Like, you're going to start Michael Wilson? Like, probably not. So, again, another matchup where the Bears have been really good at home, both against the run and against the pass. I'm not starting any Arizona. I don't want to start any Arizona Cardinals players, specifically Marquise Brown. So I'm going to sit him.
All right. He is sitting. This next one and the last one here on Derek's list hurts me deep in the cockles of my heart, but I think he's right. And I hate the fact that you're sitting him, and I hate the fact you're right. So why don't you just talk about him?
This might surprise people, but I don't want to play Zay Flowers this week. And this is not just last week's game, but last week's game did shock me. Like, fantastic matchup. He got 2 freaking targets, 1 reception, 7 yards. Is that kind of stat line going to help you move on in the fantasy playoffs? No. And you look at this week, the San Francisco 49ers since week 10 have had the 7th highest rate of too high. Versus too high, it is not Zay Flowers, baby. He's at a 17% target share, 0.9 yards per route run. You marry that with the 49ers outside corners are playing better in the last few weeks. Not playing Zay Flowers.
Okay, so Zay is out. Give us one more Erickson wide receiver who is not in for you in week 16.
Demario Douglas, he came back last week from his injury, but he's still not seeing a ton of targets from Bailey Zappi, who's been the quarterback over the last couple weeks. It's really been the Hunter Henry show. It's been the Ezekiel Elliott show. Like, that's who Bailey Zappi is kind of forcing targets to in this offense. So our question marks about Hunter Henry's status in this game. He's missing some practice with a knee injury. Regardless, though, how you attack this Broncos defense is at the running back position and at the tight end position, not really for wide receivers. So if you have Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster, if they both play in this game, just less targets for Douglas to see. So again, just another gross game environment that I just don't want any parts of. Like, there's not a lot of upside, in my opinion, in this game. So Demario Douglas, who's kind of cooled off after a hot start with the quarterback change, I just don't see a lot of upside playing him this week against Denver on the road.
All right, let's play a little game here, boys. Let's play a little Who Should I Start at wide receiver. These guys are all really close together in ECR this week. So let's talk about Terry McLaurin, D-Bro, who you don't want to start, or right next to him in ADP, you've got, let's see, Terry McLaurin, or do you want to go ahead and play Deontay Johnson? That's the question for you.
I'll play Deontay, and as crazy as it sounds, like, He's scoring touchdowns weekly. That's not something we're seeing out of Terry McLaurin. He's not even getting red zone targets. So give me Deontay.
All right, Deontay it is. Let's go to you here for one, Erickson. Drake London or Tyler Lockett? These guys are right next to each other. I know now we got Taylor Heineke, so I'm fascinated to see what your take is on this player, because this guy has an opportunity maybe to make Drake London at home relevant again like he was 2 weeks ago, or Tyler Lockett in a good matchup against Tennessee.
I mean, I'm going Drake London because he's better than Tyler Lockett is. Tyler Lockett has been super inefficient this season. Even in good matchups, like, he's left fantasy managers wanting a lot more. And I don't know, I think he's just starting to show signs of decline in age.
I agree.
He's an older player, and I think that we're seeing the JSN, that trajectory is continuing to go up and up and up. The Titans are much worse against slot receivers. That's where JSN lines up. So I think it's more of a JSN, DK Metcalf week versus a Lockett week, and he's just kind of been unreliable. So I'm going to go with Drake London. I think it's going to be a shootout in the Dome. I think it doesn't really matter to me whether it's Heineke or Ritter. They're going to feed Drake London because he's the featured weapon in the passing game. And to reference the Deontay Johnson point, I think it's Deontay Johnson by a lot. When you look at the splits with Mason Rudolph, Deontay Johnson's been really productive with Mason Rudolph. So, like, don't look at Rudolph and be like, oh my God, Mitchell Trubisky was horrible and Deontay Johnson was productive. So even though you're going to Mason Rudolph, it's at worst, I would say, just going to be net. Like, I don't think it's that significantly worse for Deontay Johnson specifically, especially with this George Pickens things going on. Like, is George Pickens going to go out and get 10 targets? Probably not. So I like Deontay
he might
Johnson.
do that, but he can't run block. We'll just throw that out there.
Well, he can. He chooses not to. He's self-protecting. Let's not
There's
forget
his decision, baby.
I saw what
Business.
happened to Tank Dell, and I don't want that to happen to me.
It's like you're also not
I was going to
165
say you're also
pounds.
not 150 pounds soaking wet last time I checked either, George Pickens. Can we get a George Pickens height weight real quick? Can you look that up, Erickson?
I mean, it's funny that he said that too, because there's no way, like, when the play's actually happening, that he's in his mind, he's like, well, what happened to Tank Dell? Like, sure, like, after the fact he can bring that up, but there's no way in the moment.
I kind of
he was
feel
like, oh no, Tank Dell.
I kind of feel like a little bit that is. Like, he
block.
kind of does know. He's 201, by the way. It's 6'3", 201. It's a little bit bigger than Tank
I love the fact that Jalen Warren called him out, and like basically like that was fantastic.
Like, score touchdowns.
I know.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Like, Jalen Warren, you're a king.
Yeah,
love it.
Love it. Real quick too, talking about Tyler Lockett, Erickson. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's very true. And I think next year, wherever Tyler Lockett is, because it's not going to be with Seattle, I wonder if we're going to have a repeat of the Adam Thielen situation of this year, where we write off a player, we think he's done, and then he ends up in an offense that might actually be pretty good, that just gets him so much volume he becomes relevant again. Derek, do you see that as a possibility? And kudos to the Seattle Seahawks for drafting JSN and seeing the future and saying, let's be prepared instead of waiting for it to fall apart like so many other teams do and then have to go in the draft. They were ahead of the game on that. So good job by Pete Carroll and company there. But what do you think about the whole Tyler Lockett thing? You think he's done completely, or maybe could have a Thielen-like resurrection in 24?
I think he could have a resurrection, and if we're going to make off-season predictions, if he's not in Seattle, I think he could be in Dallas. Former coordinator from Seattle, team that's going for the playoffs, veteran roster, add more speed.
Chiefs, they need someone that's reliable.
Chiefs is not a bad spot either. Yeah,
Chiefs need somebody.
Chiefs would be perfect. I think he'd be a good complementary piece to
Jacoby Myers
Rice.
was sitting out there for the Chiefs. Jacoby Myers would have been such a good wide receiver for the Chiefs. I can't even wrap my mind around that.
The Chiefs should have signed Julio Jones. Like, come on.
We're not that bad. No, we're not that bad, Erickson. No, we're not that bad. We are not that desperate, Erickson. No.
I need a Miller Lite for that conversation. Somebody get me a Miller Lite for that convo. All right, let's get to the quarterbacks, the tight ends, and the defenses that don't make the grade. Erickson, who is the quarterback that's riding the pine this week?
Jordan Love. Carolina, 31st in points allowed to quarterbacks this season, playing on the road. Jordan Love's been good, but weapons are injured, bad matchup. This is not the week to rely on Jordan Love.
All right, D-Bro, quarterback you can't rely on.
I don't want to play Kyler Murray. I haven't wanted to play Kyler Murray for the last few weeks, and now going up against the Bears. I mean, 7th lowest yards per attempt and 7th lowest passing touchdowns of the last few weeks. Like, I will play over Kyler Murray. I'll play Nick Mullins. That might surprise people. I'll play Joe Flacco over Kyler Murray easily.
Yeah, I'm actually not too surprised by that. Stafford's the one that I keep getting asked about, and I keep saying Stafford.
I play Stafford over him, too.
Every time. All right, let's go to the tight end. D-Bro, we'll start with you on this one. Who's the tight end that you don't want to start? This might surprise some people because you've been a big supporter of his lately.
This will surprise people, but I do not want to play Tucker Kraft this week. And I've been singing all the Tucker Kraft praises, but this matchup is terrible for him. Carolina has shut down tight ends the entire season. They're allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points per game and the 5th fewest receiving yards per game to tight ends. So while Tucker Kraft, I love you, man, and I think he's going to be the starter for Green Bay next year. No, it's not Luke Musgrave. Get that out of your brain hole. I can't play him this week.
Erickson, do you think that Debro gets frustrated when he gets a Kraft single and the plastic snaps and he can't get the cheese out? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like you go a little too hearty, you rip it, it goes a little too quick, and next thing you know, like you can't really access the cheese. You think that frustrates Derek? I think he's that guy, don't you think?
Yeah, no, for sure.
100%. Yeah, I thought so. All right.
Have y'all seen any of the videos of like tossing the cheese on like
on the
people?
babies?
Those
on the crying babies.
Those are still hilarious.
It's one of the reasons I was like, man, I wish I had a little kid just so I could try that and see if it works.
Oh, the baby videos?
The baby videos where they toss the cheese, the kid's crying and they toss the cheese. I mean, I gotta try that. Maybe I'll try that on adults. Christmas is around. You know, people say stupid crap around Christmas. Maybe I'll just walk around with a Kraft single in my pocket and just toss it on somebody's head if they're talking some stupid crap. And just see, because I imagine it is kind of off-putting. You just kind of start there and go, "What? Why?"
If you come at me with a Kraft single in Nashville, I swear to God, Jay.
I know what I'm traveling with.
Debro lays down in his bed and there's just cheese everywhere.
There's me and Thor just throwing cheese at Debro while he's passed out somewhere in a corner. All right, let's get to the next tight end on the list. Erickson, who is sitting in week 16.
Logan Thomas. Again, just don't want to play Commanders. Like, you can't rely on this offense against the New York Jets, so I'm going to sit Logan Thomas. Even though he caught a touchdown last week, it was overturned. Don't like the matchup.
All right, this next one here, Erickson, the defense, the Dallas Cowboys, snake bit me. I picked up the Texans to start over the Cowboys in the playoffs, and then they looked so good against the Eagles, I thought, you know what? And the Texans look so bad against the Jets. I overthought it, and I just said, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and play them against Buffalo. What a horrible mistake that was. Cost me a playoff run, unfortunately. But you are sitting the Cowboys this week. Let's talk about that, Erickson, and that good fantasy advice.
Yeah, I just don't like them playing on the road against a high-powered Miami Dolphins offense that should be getting Tyreek Hill back. It's just, there are better streamable matchups that you can go after than facing Dallas. I know they've been a defense that's been really productive, but it's a 1 week that you have to win. And they're definitely not the top DST that you can find, especially with a lot of teams on waivers. So I would avoid them.
All right, D-Bro, who are you avoiding at defense this week?
Same thing as Erickson. High-profile team. I'm not playing the Ravens. And the only analysis you need to know is they play the 49ers, who are probably going to drop 35 on them this week. So
you can probably drop the Ravens because they play Miami next week. So
right, yeah, I would say the same thing. I've been telling people to drop them for the Bears. Like, that's the streaming defense I want this week. But, you know, that's the we'll talk more about that another time. But in the meantime, if you need more help, go to fantasypros.com/start or check out the ECR rankings over fantasypros.com/rankings. That's where you go. And, of course, you can always follow us at Fantasy Pros on social for as many questions as you might have. We'll do our best to get to you. And of course, our Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. Go in there, get in there. It's free, and you can ask us questions, and then you can go ahead and win that championship, boys and girls. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Derek Brown and Andrew Erickson, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.